Nick C. Listening to Lawrence Woodcraft's account of his life as a Scientologist, I noticed that Scientology had to do a serious run around the immigration rules to get him to come to Clearwater from his native England and stay there. Elsewhere, Jason Begay stated that on several occasions his calls to Clearwater had been answered by people who seemed to have limited command of the English language and accents that he thought to be Eastern European. It is also widely known that Mike Rinder is from Australia and Hannah Eltringham Whitfield is from South Africa. So if we assume that the Eastern Europeans encountered by Begay, along with the Australians, Brits, and South Africans he didn't peg as such, had to jump through the same hoops Lawrence Woodcraft did, it would appear that there are at least a few people in the Sea Org who, due to the Sea Org's policies, are technically in violation of immigration rules, as is the Sea Org itself. Hence, a three-part question. A, have you encountered non-U.S. Sea Org personnel during your time as a Scientologist? And if so, how often? B, has Scientology ever butted heads with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, over the status of Sea Org members who are not U.S. citizens or permanent residents? And C, how likely, in your opinion, is this kind of head-butting to happen in the near future? All right, so immigration and the Sea Org and Scientology. I did a whole podcast this week on the subject of immigration, my Sensibly Speaking podcast. And so I'm kind of all, boned up on the subject of immigration. And there's a lot to know about the topic, right? And it's not necessarily the case that, the immigration rules for coming into the United States make a lot of sense, or really are the way that they should be. So I will say that. But certainly no defense of Scientology, who routinely will do a runaround. But I first want to make it clear that it's not just in the area of immigration that Scientologists, or Sea Org members especially, will try to do a runaround of the law. They'll do that with anything that they think is getting in their way, because the Sea Org considers its mission and purpose senior to anything going on in the world. There isn't anything, any law, any rule, anything, any person that's more important as far as a Sea Org member is concerned than the Sea Org's mission. And so they don't care about what they call WOG law, right? These pesky rules and details and visas and citizenship papers and all this other stuff. They don't care about any of that. Or they don't care about it any farther than they need to in order to get whatever product or thing it is that they're trying to achieve or get. So if they're trying to bring somebody over from Europe, let's say, let's break this down into your questions. So first you say, have you encountered any non-U.S. Sea Org personnel? Yeah, of course I did. I worked in the Sea Organization for 17 years in Los Angeles. I met Italians, French, Germans, Austrians, Hungarians, English, Romanians, Russians. I met people from all over the world. Plenty of Australians, plenty of Canadians, New Zealanders, Mexicans, people from Peruvians, Argentinians. I met all of those kinds of nationalities in Scientology and in the Sea Org. So, and then has Scientology ever butted heads with ICE over the status of Sea Org members? Yeah, they have, definitely. And here's how that works. Scientology, or the Sea Org rather, will bring people into the country on R1 visas, religious worker visas. And I'm not an expert on religious worker visas. That wasn't my job. It wasn't anything I ever had to directly deal with. It was something I observed happening. So I can only talk about it to the degree that I saw what happened. There were other people in the Sea Org, the people who were over personnel, who were very educated on the subject and knew all the ins and outs and knew how to go down to the immigration office and get the R1 visas, and they knew what to say and how to say it, and they had forms and everything. They knew all the forms to fill out, and they had worked this whole thing out so that people could come from Mexico or from Europe, Russia, Hungary, whatever. And what I observed is the rules called for, R1 visas were not permanent citizenship situations, right? So people would come over on these, and they were only supposed to be here as religious workers for X amount of time, or or they had to be doing X kind of job, and they couldn't be transferred around from place to place and that sort of thing. When the R1 visa would run out, then the person had to be sent back to their country, and then another R1 visa gotten, or something else had to be worked out. And there were plenty of times where I saw that the person had overextended, or there were troubles with the visa situation and this kind of thing. And it was only when it became a real problem, when the authorities were going to start making noise about it or something, that action would actually be taken. And that's what I saw happen with that. It was always sort of, basically the attitude was, do the minimum that you have to in order to comply with whatever laws you have to comply with in order to get the guy here so that he can be a Sea Org member and do the job that needed to be done. And then C, how likely, in your opinion, is this kind of headbutting to happen in the near future? Well, I have no reason to believe that the Sea Org or Scientology has changed their tune at all. They're still bringing people over from Russia into Clearwater. They're still bringing people, I'm sure, from Central and South America into Los Angeles, for work in at the PAC base, at the big blue buildings, or people from Eastern, Europe or Western Europe. So that's what I observed on that, right, is basically the attitude of skirt the law, get away with, doing as little as possible for as much as you can get. And then when their feet are held to the fire, then they'll send the person back to their country of origin or to another place like England or something. They'll transfer them over there, and then the guy's not here anymore. And I wish I was one of those personnel people so I could answer more specifically how this kind of thing happens. Also, there's an interview I did with Shane Waitman, who grew up in France and England, and is an ex-Scientologist, and I did a series with him. And he describes in our interviews how he was sent for training from England to Clearwater, Florida, and how he had to lie to the immigration authorities and that sort of thing in order to get the visa to come over and study. And he was drilled on what to say and how to say it and that sort of thing. So you can watch that interview as well to see what Shane's experience was directly with that.